mentality. I've seen you talk about this. Yes. Now, give us some background on it, because some English people won't know what you mean.
It's just the oppression Olympics. Everybody wants to say, I deserve more because I'm more oppressed than you. I might say that I'm more oppressed than you because I'm black, right? And you're white. So instantly I'm more oppressed and I deserve more and my voice should be louder. And then we say, okay, well, you're a male and I'm a woman. So instantly I deserve even more because I'm a woman and you're a male, and women are more oppressed, which is totally a lie. And I should have my voice heard louder. And then you keep going, gay, straight, and they've created all of these little pockets, and you have to figure out who is the most oppressed person. I guess it would be a disabled black female gay person would probably be the most. If you want to win the oppression Olympics, that's it. And everyone should fawn over you, and everything you say should count and should matter. And it's absolute crap. The victim mentality is what's stopping most people from getting from point A to point B.
Welcome back to another episode of Making a Case. We're on episode 111. I'm your host, Dr. Jacob Isom. If you can't tell, we're talking about the victim mentality. All right. I know that you have been around people, maybe have friends and people in your family that have that victim mentality. Hey, it may be you that have that victim mentality. Okay. So we're talking about how the victim mentality can hold us back and how the victim mentality is really keeping us in a disadvantage. Right now. Well, before I go on, of course, we got 2 channel norms. 1, we'll take points and not people. And then 2, we don't do all that cussing derogatory stuff, but we like to keep it professional over here. But the reason why I really wanted to go over this topic is because every last one of us can find a reason why we're not where we want to be. We can find a reason why we don't have the love of our life. We can find a reason why we're overweight, right? So the victim mentality doesn't just go to gender, race, culture, and things of that nature. It also goes to us keeping us and holding us back from just a mentality standpoint, right? The reason why I can't lose weight, the reason why I may be shorter than most people. It's like it's excusatory behavior is what it really is. And I agree with Candace. It is one of the reasons, or one of the biggest reasons, that hold a lot of people back from getting to be where they want to be. But of course, we're going to focus on the victim mentality as it does relate to race, gender, ethnicity, sexual orientation, and things of that nature, because this is where we more see the victim card or the victim mentality as it relates to that. Now, I'm not saying that people do not have a reason to be upset that people aren't oppressed in some kind of way, but we also got to understand we live in one of the freest nations in the whole entire world, right? We have freedoms and rights that most countries do not have, okay? A lot of people are literally killing themselves just to get over here. Now, that's not excusing what the government does. That's not excusing what we do as society. That's not excusing what we do as a culture. But it is to say that in the United States of America, this is a country where you can literally pull yourself up by the bootstraps and become a millionaire or become very successful and live a pretty good life. Okay. And so I do think the victim mentality will hold you back if you're constantly screaming, hey, particularly as it relates to when it comes to slavery, right? Because Black people like to bring up slavery. We like to bring up reparations and things of that nature. And the conversation has really gotten old. And the reason why it's getting old is because, like, no one is coming to save us. No one is giving us money. No one is giving us land. What we have to focus on is uniting and doing it for ourselves. That is what we should understand. But because we have a hard time doing that, then kind of our go-to a lot of times is to complain and play victim. All right. That's just one reason. All right. So for today's episode, I have 2 videos that I want to go over, and we're going to break down the whole idea behind the victim mentality and why people use it, and, things of that nature. All right. So without further ado, let's get into our first video.
And the mind has a really, really bizarre, like it has a really bizarre truth, which is that it prefers the comfortable to the good. So if your mind has a choice between picking something that it's familiar with and picking something that's good, it's actually going to pick something that's familiar with. And what I want you guys to understand about victimizing yourself is that someone who victimizes.
And I hate to stop it this early, but that's a lot of things I don't think people understand is the fact that the brain a lot of times is going to function the way it makes it more operable, meaning that it's going to always go to the go-to, right? It's something familiar, then it's going to go to that. All right. So sometimes literally the way our brain is functioning, and of course it has a lot to do with hormones and chemicals and things of that nature, but like our brain is literally a sponge. It's going to take in certain things, and when of course we get so much information, it's going to take the things that are more viable, the things that makes the most sense. So let's keep going.
Themselves is in an abusive relationship with themselves. And we have to remember that people stay in abusive relationships. Human beings stay in abusive relationships all the time. And then the question becomes, why do people stay in abusive relationships? Like, let's be scientific about it, right? Let's not judge and say that, oh, that's stupid. Let's ask ourselves as scientists, why does the human mind do what it does? Why on earth does someone stay with someone who like hits them? Like, what the fuck is going on in their mind? And we have to accept that there's a damn good reason that they are in that relationship, because there's got to be a damn good reason. If they're in a relationship where someone treats them like shit, you have to think about scales being weighed. And if someone's treating you like shit, like that's really heavy. So in order to stay in that relationship, you've got to have something really powerful to balance it. And that's that the mind prefers the familiar to the good. And the reason.
And I think he made a great point when he talking about the victim mindset, the victim blaming is like, really, it's the relationship with yourself. I talk a lot of times about having a relationship with yourself. I talk a lot about not lying to yourself, because unfortunately that's what a lot of us do, right? So when it comes to the victim mindset and the victim blaming, a lot of it is that comforting yourself, that soothing yourself, right? Telling yourself what you want to hear, what you need to know. Like he's talking about the whole idea of people being in an abusive relationship, right? You're telling yourself, you know what? You're excusing their behavior. You're saying, you know what, maybe they had a hard day. Maybe is it they'll get better and things that. So you're literally lying to yourself. Okay. So the most important relationship is a relationship with yourself. If you don't have a healthy relationship with yourself, if you don't establish boundaries, if you don't understand that it's okay to say no, even to yourself, that you should be looking at delayed gratification versus instant gratification, it's going to be a hard road. So a lot of these things are tied to, of course, the brain, but also our relationship and how we socialize with other, and really how we take in ourselves. Let's continue.
That people victimize themselves is because they're familiar with it, right? Like, why does Jessica tell her? So in her mind, the part of herself that beats herself up is basically like a copy paste. It's a copy pasta of her dad. It's her dad's voice that lives in her mind. It's exactly what her dad would be saying in those moments. That's what she tells herself. She learned that. And why on earth does she continue to victimize herself? It's because her mind prefers the known to the unknown. And that makes sense, right? Like, why do people stay in abusive relationships? It's because they don't know what else is down there. They don't know if loneliness is next. They don't know if they're ever going to find someone down the road. And think about that for a second. If someone in an abusive relationship feels like they're a piece of shit, and if you really believe that you're a piece of shit, then why do you think that you like the grass would be greener on the other side? You believe that the grass is greener on the other side if you have faith in yourself as a human being to make it greener. But if you're in an abusive relationship, you don't think that you're a good person, and you don't think that you're going to find someone better. You don't believe that you're worthy of someone better.
And think about it from this angle as well. That's why it's difficult for a lot of people to take in new information, even if they read it, even if it was a situation where they read it in college, which is way more possible and likely that they will actually receive that information if it's new, if it go against their morals and values and things of that nature. But when people read something on social media or see something or somebody is telling them something that is actually factual, right? And they be like, nah, because it's going against something that they know and been knowing for a long time, particularly when we're talking about religious views, right? If somebody tell you something that you've been pumped and fed your whole life, you don't want to go against that because it's known to you, right? So a lot of it has to do with what we accept as truth and non-truth, right? Let's wrap this on up.
You're going to stay in the abusive relationship. And victimizing yourself is an abusive relationship with yourself, right? That's what it really is. And we stay in those because we don't think that we can find a better way. She doesn't think that there's a part of Jessica that doesn't understand that there is a better way out there because her dad taught her this since she was like 1 year old or even younger. There were times, honestly, where she was probably crying when she was 6 months old and her dad did not pick her up and comfort her. And that left its mark. That's trauma. What we're dealing with here is not like anxiety or depression, it's trauma. And the reason that people victimize themselves is because that's what they were taught to do. Monkey see, monkey.
And that last point that he made was such an important point because when it comes to the whole victim mentality, what we're really talking about is what we've been taught, socialization, right? Now, we could throw in, because you always going to be talking about nature and nurture, like sometimes it's going to be more nature, sometimes it's going to be more nature, but they work hand in hand, just like the brain and culture, right? The culture impacts the brain and the brain impacts culture based on how we think and what we think. But we've been socialized a lot of times to be a victim, right? We had no experience with slavery, right? We're talking about the last few generations. No experience. A lot of us didn't have no experience with Jim Crow, right? I mean, even like we have very little discriminatory like practice. We could talk about the system all we want, but like a lot of us really haven't experienced this thing yet. We've been told and we learned about it through history. And so what do? We internalize it. Okay. So a lot of it is not that it's made up because discrimination and stuff like that exists. But a lot of it, like we cannot go through it, but we feel the pain from our ancestors and other people that we want to jump on the bandwagon and be victims too. We want to blame outside factors for why we're not where we want to be. So I thought that was an important point for him to bring up. I got one more video and then we're going to wrap things up. Let's get into it.
Wait, hang on 1 second, bro. You remember when we did the stairs thing? Remember that a few weeks ago? And I showed you that no matter what, if you're poor, and a really interesting study just came out about differences. Where you start is really largely going to shape where you end. As much as we want to believe that we can all be rich or whatever, by and large, where you start is where you're going to end. You remember when we did the thing on the stairs and I had the wealthier students and they're up here, and then we had poor students who were down here, right? Remember that? And do you remember what I said to the poor students? What are you going to do? Do you remember what I said? I said, there's nothing you can do. Just keep trying. You just keep going. And what I find is you can't blame anybody. If you sit back, we have this idea that people who experience discrimination just sit around and blame the system and don't do anything. And that's not the case at all.
Well, I think it is the case for a lot of people, but I totally agree with him, and because stats just back it up, right? Like he said, he pointed out a study, like most people are going to be born poor and they're going to die poor, right? It's more likely that you're going to be born rich and not end up rich or more wealthy, but it's definitely more likely that you're going to be born poor and you're going to die poor, right? And the only thing people can do is you're born in a situation, so you just got to work, right? If you want to get out the situation you were born in, which you had no control over, you just got to put your head down. You got to work. I tell my students all the time, I tell people all the time, I wasn't born in the greatest environment. I was born impoverished, right? But I worked and I never made excuses and I learned, right? So we're in a situation where we do have a lot of advantages, even the poorest of us in this country. Poverty in United States of America or in the West looks different than poverty in Haiti, in Singapore, right? In parts of Asia. It just looks different. And we got to be honest with ourselves. Let's keep going.
The people who are most likely to experience discrimination are actually the ones most likely to do exactly what the two of you just said, which is like, dude, just like whatever it is, what it is, let me just keep working hard. But what we have is this ideology that we live with in the United States in particular. Y'all, here, listen to this. We have this ideology in the United States in particular that people who are most likely to experience discrimination, what do they most often do? Sit around and complain and don't try to move forward. When in fact, it's absolutely the opposite of what we see. We see people sit around and complain and then also work as hard or twice as hard as they would otherwise trying to move forward.
I think people complain, but I think people also take penitentiary chances. People look at get rich quick schemes, and a lot of it is about money, right? Because when you're in poverty, you're trying to get more money, right? You're trying to go, the low class is trying to get to the middle class, and the middle class is trying to get to the high class, right? It's all a rat race. It's all a game, and we understand it. But like, I think people do complain, but people also try to work hard. There's a lot of people who do try to work hard, but a lot of times we're complaining while we're doing that. I mean, that's just the facts. And of course, this is context, right? This is a white man talking about what other people are experiencing. I'm telling you, as somebody who have experience living in this country as a minority, that these are the things that's going on. These are the conversations that's being had. These are the things that I've witnessed and I've seen and I've heard.
Knowing that they might have additional obstacles. So the idea of like, yeah, just whatever, embrace it and move on. That's the sentiment I hear from more than any other people. That is the idea or the sentiment that I hear from Black people. It's like, yeah, man, I just deal with it and I move on. And what I find is that people have it's like a protective thing. If you have a sense, here, follow this, man, this is especially true of those of you who identify as conservatives, who I'm going to say, if you're watching Fox News and you identify, that's not conservative, by the way. Nonetheless, if you watch Fox News, my gut feeling is you probably don't and have not and do not spend a lot of time having conversations with conscientized people of dark skin, who are really thinking and talking a lot about these issues. It might be the very people who are complaining about it, but it's a lot easier to be up here in this place if I can imagine that the people down there who are complaining about the discrimination that may well have benefited me being here, that it's a lot easier for me to be here if I think that, oh, they're just complaining and don't want to work hard. But in fact,
and to be honest with you, I think that's a great point that he made, because a lot of times the people up here saying, you know what, if you did less complaining and more working, that is an excuse a lot of time for people who, whether they made it off their merit and hard work or whether somebody gave it to them. The thinking is, well, if you stop complaining and did more working, you'll be where I'm at. Now, there is some truth to it, but also we got to understand is there are systems that are literally put in place, right, in order to make sure we know nepotism is real, right? There's system put in place to make sure that we all heard of the good old boy club, right? To make sure things stay status quo, right? We see it in education, we see it in business, we see it in science, right? Engineering, any field you want to talk about, right? Banking. So the whole idea of that, like, we have classes and there's a small percentage of people that's going to move up from one class to the other because it's designed to keep most people exactly where they are. Let's finish this on out.
That's not the case at all, man. I can go around the room and start giving the microphone to all sorts of black people and dark skin and Latinos in here and just ask them, what did your parents say about discrimination? And without across the board, you're going to experience it. You're going to have to work twice as hard. I'm not going to find anybody, not a single person. I've never met anybody. In fact, and I've lived in all sorts of neighborhoods. I've never met anyone who's just said, yeah, well, I'm just going to experience discrimination, so F it, I'm not even going to try. Like, that's this ideology that has been imposed by this kind of strand of people in the U.S. who like to think that they identify a certain way, that are just trying to make excuses for their own position. But I never hear anybody saying that. Dude, seriously, look, you understand, conservatives, can I just say something to conservatives? If you watch Fox News, can I just tell you something? I am a registered libertarian. I'm probably more right-wing than you are. Fox News is not conservative. It's just people just spewing out nonsense who never actually have conversations. And same with CNN and MSNBC, by the way. My God, you're better off watching Russian television.
All right, there you have it. I was actually surprised that he made those last comments, being that he knew he was being videotaped. I don't know. Maybe Penn State is one of those universities who, are more liberal or doesn't mind those type of talking points. I don't know. But regardless, I thought it was a great conversation, even though there wasn't a lot of kind of back and forth going on with the students, which it was a pretty large class. But I thought he makes some good points because no, you're not going. And part of the problem is we don't have enough diverse spaces where people are getting to experience different races, different genders, because we definitely we're more homophilic, which means that we're dealing with white women gonna be mostly with white women, black men gonna be mostly with black men. So like we don't have enough diversity in our friend groups. Now, some friend groups you will see a lot of diversity, but most of us don't have a lot of diversity in our friend group. So what do? We keep the ideology and we keep the whole perception going that certain people do certain things. That's where stereotypes and biases really kind of rear their ugly heads. But at the end of the day, the victim mentality, it doesn't help anyone. Right? Because regardless of where you started, it's about where you finish. And I think a lot of us understand that. So for us to keep complaining, whether that's men, whether that's minorities or what have you, like, now, it's one thing to fight for what is right, to fight against injustices, to fight against discrimination, bias, to fight for equity. That's one thing, right? I don't think nobody would disagree with that. But if you're just complaining to be complaining, like, your words got to mean something, right? They got to be in spaces where it's supposed to be, like in town hall meetings and things of that nature, right? Like where you're not just complaining, but you're saying something and you also have solutions to it, right? You also are talking about bills that need to become laws, right? So it has to be productive. Otherwise, you just complaining, you just talking, and eventually people grow tired of that and they just don't want to hear it. All right. We're gonna end the episode right there, man. Hopefully, you get, a different perspective. Y'all know how I am when it comes to perspective, and we can continue the conversation on another video if you like. But as always, like, comment, subscribe, share the video, man. Let's get this out there, man. As always, I'm you and me. Love, always love, eternal. Remember, the worst thing you can do is lie to yourself. And we out. Deuces. One love.